Testing, 1 2 1 2. This is your brother Asar Imhotep with the Mbongi and the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And this is the after show for the conversation that we had in the previous show that started at 4:15 regarding to asking the question rather to reconstruct or not reconstruct Egyptian before comparing. And there seemed to be a few people with a few questions that they wanted answered, and they wanted to be able to come on the panel and speak their mind. So this is the opportunity to allow them to do such a thing, and just waiting for them to click the link. The link is in the chat room, and it is pinned to the top for anyone who wants to join the panel and have a discussion. So all that and more when we return in just a second. And we are back, and just giving a little time for the people who want to join the conversation and ask their questions in person to click the link. Again, the link is pinned to the top in the chat on YouTube. So hold on. Let me start off here. Peace and blessings to each of you who have come back from the first conversation and who are joining us now. And we have our first question here. It says, this is from Simi M. And it says, peace, brother Sar. Have you looked into the phonological reconstruction methods by Lopriano, Marwin Kilani, and James P. Allen? When it comes to Lopriano and James P. Allen, yes, I have. But for Marwin Kilani, no, I have not. So I'm not familiar with that work. But the other two I have. And in both instances, there is there's no comparative data used in it. And we really don't know where they got their reconstructions from, because there's no detail, there's no showing of their work in the text. And so, and I have Lupriano's 1995-96 book, and I have James P. Allen, the physical book as well, but I also have a PDF of his Ancient Egyptian Phonology book that recently came out, and so I can pull that up later if need be. But I'm familiar with Lupriano and Allen, but not Kalani. Let me see. Oh no, I believe he's gonna come. He's just gonna come late. He's gonna try to do the make it seem like he's a no-show. Then at last minute he's just gonna hit the link. So we're just gonna hope that he hits the link. And peace to brother Mathis. And Fire Light and Tist is in the building, and brother Chavez is in the building. It looks like we have Black Bodie in the building. Peace and blessings to you, Black Bodie. Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm the one who was challenging you in the comment section. I'm that person.
Well, there's multiple, so I'm assuming that was you went by another name, Tick.
Tia, yeah, Tack Freak 11, Tia K FREAK11.
All right.
It's an
All
old
right.
YouTube profile. Yeah.
All righty. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Hold on before we start. Let me tag this comment. It says Kiani argues that Egyptian script does indicate vowels through the method of group writing. You should check it out. Check out his paper. Alrighty, will do. And that's not a new uh, hypothesis. And matter of fact, James P. Allen discusses that a little bit in his work on ancient Egyptian phonology. That may indeed be the case. I don't recall if he cites Kiliani um, on that, but so there we go. And one more before we get started. What is the community consensus on the reason why the royalty of ancient Kemet civilization went unchanged for over 3,000 years, but the common culture changed with the wind? Um, I'm not sure if you can argue that over the 3,000 year period that uh, the royal institution, there's lots of evidence of change uh, in within that time period, in terms of, especially when it comes to, of course, the dynasties, and what deities and houses were elevated and promoted, in terms of the combining of attributes, the changing and differing in myths and stories. There's a lot to consider, even in terms of uh, agricultural styles and tools and things. So I wouldn't necessarily say it was unchanged. It was, when it comes to things like religious and of the nature of royalty, it tends to change slower. But I'm not even sure that one could argue that the common folks culture changed uh, with the wind either. And I would like to see where you are drawing that conclusion from, that is such the case. Uh, but now that we got our good brother here, um, I'll give you an opportunity to state your disagreement and what essentially is your argument.
Yeah. I mean, my argument is just, it just goes along with mainstream scholarship, right? You argue that you couldn't find these connections between Semitic languages and ancient Egyptian languages, which I find odd because some
Hold
of the
on,
grammar
hold on,
rules.
hold on. I have to stop you there. And normally I don't interrupt. When have you ever heard me say that there are no connections between Semitic and ancient Egyptian?
I don't think you said no connections, but you said that you're comparing the algorithm you were using for the Yorubas and comparing that to Semitic language, and you're saying that you wouldn't find that. Maybe I
No,
misunderstood you.
you wouldn't. Um, well, it depends. In many instances, you would not be able to find a, how should I say, like when we're doing our comparative sets, it's hard to establish regular sound meaning correspondences between ancient Egyptian and Semitic. A matter of fact, there was a conference that was just put on a couple of years ago by a number of linguists who also made that conclusion. And matter of fact, the proceedings of that conference is supposed to be published in December of this year. The last that I spoke with the publishers. So I look forward to that. And what I'm gonna try to do is find that that conference and the conclusion of uh, at least one of the presenters who dealt specifically with that. So I can show you that this is the mainstream consensus when it comes to the comparative method. So what you got to understand is that when we're establishing um, relationships between languages and so-called families, the method that is used is the historical comparative method. That is the method that is used to establish those relationships. When you're talking about so-called Greenbergian mass comparative method. That is not the method that was used in terms of the comparative method to establish Niger-Congo, Nilo-Saharan, Afro-Asiatic, or Khoisan. And so what linguists are discovering, which many African linguists have already been telling them for years, is that when you apply the comparative method, for example, between Semitic and ancient Egyptian, you cannot establish a relationship. And so I'm gonna find that for you, but I'm gonna let you continue. But I wanted to make sure that that we my comments are put in context for which you started off the conversation. But go ahead.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because I was gonna mention that, I think it was E.A. Wallace Budge, in a book called, An Egyptian Hieroglyphic Dictionary. He talks about, triliteral roots in the pyramid text and how certain, grammatical conventions in ancient Egyptian are very much Semitic, but that there are basal words in ancient Egyptian which aren't Semitic at all. These words sort of express, fundamental African concepts, right? That aren't really found in Semitic languages. And so he says, the language at its core, ancient Egyptian, is not Semitic, even though you find these sort of superficial um, Semitic conventions in their language when it comes to like how they might record numbers or how they might talk about and gender and things like that. So I'm not saying that ancient Egyptian is a Semitic language. I just think that it has more of a connection to Chadic and Amadic languages in that region of Northeast Africa than it would with quote unquote Niger Congo languages, which by the way, Niger Congo B, like Proto Bantu, has been reconstructed. Like that is a language family that I think is well founded, and if you wanna connect it to ancient Egyptian, no issue there, right? But the idea, that I've seen a lot of people, a lot of your followers posit is that, okay, Afroasiatic is not a real sort of language family because there is not a really good reconstruction of Afroasiatic, right? On the other hand, I see that you're arguing that Bantu isn't a real language family, even though like Proto-Bantu has been reconstructed. You know what I mean? It's like, so what is the metric by which you decide specifically? Because yeah, a lot of these language families are hypothetical, right? Afroasiatic is hypothetical. Some people argue Nilo-Saharan is just Greenberg dumping a whole bunch of things into the same category. Maybe they're right. Who knows, right? There hasn't been dispositive evidence or reconstruction. But when it comes to saying ancient Egyptian and Yoruba are somehow connected, what's the mechanism by which that could happen? Because you're arguing, okay, view this in a vacuum. Look at these patterns and view it in a vacuum and see the connections. And you're totally right. It could be a coincidence. And in fact, without sort of a connection um, of like cultural material, it probably is a coincidence. And you can test it from a statistical standpoint. I don't know how you would construct that, how we would choose to prove that. But generally, these things have to sort of align. Like Christopher Ehret was able to um, not reconstruct, but he was able to map the diffusion of what he calls Proto-Saharan Sahelian, right? So if you wanted to unify Nilo-Saharan and Sahelian languages that eventually became Afro-Asiatic, he maps that with the spreading of grains and cattle in northern parts of Africa, because we know that there were that the people who came to inhabit the Nile, a lot of them were living in North Africa during the Holocene, right? And so if you don't have any connection to cultural material, it could still be true that there is a connection between these languages, but it makes your argument all that much weaker, right? If it doesn't align with the actual material history.
I see. I appreciate your insight. And so there's really kind of a lot to unpack. And by way of uh, much of what you said, uh, uh, it, it it's clear that you're going to have to learn a lot about historical comparative linguistics. And so I didn't say that Proto-Bantu was not a language per se. Um, just that the grammar has not been reconstructed. So when you go into Bantu language centers, they're talking about like the lack of a reconstructed grammar for Proto-Bantu. Proto-Bantu basic vocabulary and the like has been reconstructed to the best of their ability up to this date. And so there's a difference. And I wanted to just show and read before we go on, and so I can end that last uh, bit when it comes to uh, the Semitic uh, issue. I don't know if this is right. Here we go. So uh, this there was actually two conferences. So one was held at UT Austin in Texas, and then another one was at a university in Connecticut. Uh, and this individual spoke at both of them. And so the title of his presentation was Rethinking the Relationship Between Egyptian and Semitic, the Morphological, Lexical, and Phonological Evidence. Aaron Wilson Wright. So again, the book for which the conference proceedings is to be published this year at the end of the year, either November, December, right? So although Egyptologists and Semiticists alike agree that Egyptian and Semitic are genetically related based on morphological evidence, they have yet to establish systematic sound correspondences between the two language families. And so this is critical here. So what you're going to have to understand is how we establish the relationship between two or more languages, and even to establish a language family, is by the method which evokes, non-accidental sound meaning correspondences between the languages. This is how we establish Yoruba and Egyptian relations, not any other way. This is the standard method across the world for all linguists who deal in historical comparative linguistics. So the lack of sound correspondences in turn raises doubts about the relationship between Egyptian and Semitic, meaning when you apply the standard method that is used around the world to establish the genetic relationship between families and languages, when you apply that between Semitic languages and ancient Egyptian, there is a great lack of sound correspondences. And it raises doubts about the relationship between Egyptian and Semitic, and necessitates a renewed analysis of their shared features. In other words, prior to doing this process, they just assumed that there was a relationship because of typological features. And, a typological feature is just a kind of a surface feature of languages, you know. So it's just like, I'll use the analogy of our good brother Wujawu. If you walked into an area and you seen people wearing a group of people wearing red shirts and another group of people wearing green shirts, you know, that would be equivalent to saying those people who wear red shirts are all genetically related and have the same great great grandmother, right? And those in the green shirt, the same. That these are distinct families, you know. And it may be a different case altogether, but that's just an assumption, and that's what they've done with Semitic languages in ancient Egyptian. And so when for example, the so-called tri-consonantal form of the language, right? Matter of fact, Roger Blinch released an article arguing that Niger Congo had tri-consonantal roots. These are typological correspondences that don't mean genetic relationship. And so like we would have to do a whole series of shows to demonstrate, you know, how historical comparative linguistics works and what that means and what they look for and what they throw away as a result, of the process. But I'm gonna continue. In this talk, I will review the morphological, lexical, phonological evidence for a genetic relationship between Semitic and Egyptian by comparing Proto Semitic and internally reconstructed Egyptian forms, a standard historical linguistic procedure. All right. So when we talk about the comparison, this is the standard that has helped establish numerous language families ranging from Indo European to Uto Aztecan. Based on this comparison, I argue that there is insufficient evidence to support a genetic relationship between Egyptian and Semitic. This is not to say that the two language families are not genetically related, only that it is impossible to detect a genetic relationship between them using current methodology. And so, when people are making these arguments, I always ask them for proof, always ask them for the source. Show me the text where they did any kind of comparative analysis between Semitic languages and Egyptian in the way that um, the comparative method requires. And most folks don't even know how the comparative method works or what it is. And
Yeah.
and this is and this is something that I have to remind people of. So with this just coming out, all this talk about relationship between uh Egyptian and Semitic is just made up stuff. It's hypotheses that people are running around here talking about as facts. And we have to always be careful with that. We always demand the proof. So let me remove this. I see that we have Trade Day in Trade Day 90 to be exact in the building. Peace and blessings and welcome to the program.
What's good? What's good, man? Yeah, Asar, big fan, man, big fan. Me and Black Bodie, um, we've been butting heads on Twitter Space since about January, and Black Bodie is very adamant on saying that for one, the Ramesh does not mean Bantu. When I like, for example, when I show him that common graphic where you show the Book of Known Races in ancient Kemet, and it shows the two black African representatives for the Ramesh. Bodhi says that that does not mean Bantu, and I think that he needs to be informed on why it does. He's very adamant on it not meaning Bantu, very adamant, and he also Bodhi also does not believe that the Bantu language family originated around the Great Lakes region. He does not believe that he does not believe that it permeated dynastic Egypt in any way, shape, or form. Despite, for example, Christopher Everett even noted in his fucked up Greenberg background that Niger Congo originated in the Eastern Sudan. So even he has to acknowledge the Eastern and Northeast African, at least inhabitation of the so-called Bantu languages, or its encompassing parent language. So I mean, I really want you to break down to him why Joseph Greenberg is full of shit. Why Afro, he really believes Afroasiatic is like the descendant from his family. Afroasiatic is completely a fact to him. I've asked him repeatedly, can you please provide me with anybody who has reconstructed this language family? I've shown him Camel Imposter's critique of Afroasiatic and Christopher Everett's fucked up reconstruction in '96, and you know how they just basically just shit on the classification. But for some reason, he thinks that we're Soto because we don't go along with what these mainstream white people say, even though they can't back their shit up.
So
So
Akita is
I mean,
mainstream and
hold
white.
on, hold on, hold
Man,
on, hold on, hold on before we go there. You got to understand that Christopher Everett and Greenberg and the like, they're not mainstream, even though they're white. See, the thing is that they have just dominated discussions in African linguistics, but the rest of the world does not recognize them or their methods. And I've documented this a number of times. So when people try to make it seem like they are the mainstream, no, they are the fringe. And that's why nobody accepts their methods when it comes to this thing. But the issue with the rematch and all of that, that's a show. And I've already done a show on that. And if he wants to come another time and discuss that, we can do that as well. I want to make sure that I address his comments about the previous presentation and the like on this particular program right now. So I want to jump into areas, because that's going to require uh, some lessons for him, and it's clear that he's not really familiar with linguistics, historical comparative linguistics, and the various arguments and the like. And so this is what happens when, and I'm not saying because I'm not familiar with him. So unlike you, I don't think I have a history with him and having discussions with him online. But when it comes to people like in Team Osiris or pseudo killers or anybody of the like, what they do is that they come to a conclusion first, and then they try to find information out on the web that seems to back up their conclusions, and they want to rush to the internet and start making arguments and not studying the field itself and understand like this stuff takes years, and but they're trying to make these quick arguments and run to YouTube channels. And so I can't say the same for him. I don't know him or any history with him, but that's uh, many of uh, his statements seem to be in alignment with that spirit. Because you're making arguments about me. I mean, you're claiming that I'm making arguments that I've never made, and there's a clear misunderstanding of what the arguments are, what the actual literature says, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's what I want to address based on his statements just now. He's not ready for the rematch because he got to understand how linguistics works first before I could just start hitting him with the rematch stuff.
Right. So like when you talked about historical comparative linguistics, right? That was sort of my issue with the whole argument of like boiling this down to mathematics because um for example, some words, some names in Igbo, okay? Very much easy to write them using the Japanese alphabet. Very easy, like Nakechi, all right, or Amachi or something like that. It's like, oh, that's very easy to write in Japan. It's just a coincidence, right? There's no sort of historical patterns that you can map. Whereas um, for ancient Egyptian, you can find some Nilo-Saharan loan words, right? So like there are certain vegetation that were introduced from I don't want to say Nubia, but introduced from the south into the Egyptian territory, and their words for it align with these Nilo-Saharan words, right? And so it's likely to be a loan word. Like when the word for like a cattle pen is very similar between these cultures, you can understand like okay, so then maybe these are the people who helped introduce cattle into the region. And the same can be true for goats, right? And other sort of animals that are not native to Africa, but were introduced by quote unquote Semitic peoples or Western Asian peoples. On the other hand, you have words like ebony in ancient Egyptian, which refer to this dark colored black wood, right? But they're very similar to the word abani, something similar like that. I could be pronouncing it wrong in Chadic languages, right? But we know that, like, okay, Chad is kind of distant from the ancient Egyptian culture, at least according to the material records that we see today. So it's likely that both of these groups of people at one point spoke a similar language in which that word was introduced to both of them, rather than saying the ancient Egyptians were introduced to ebony from people from Chad, because we know that they got their ebony mostly from places like Punt. And so I understand that, but I think that arguing that we can reduce um,
Mm.
this study to just like okay, logic sort of takes out the actual important part of comparative historical linguistics, which is like looking if the history matches up with it. And so for FBA Trey, he uses Soy Kita's arguments, right? So Soy Kita addresses, for example, that 2017 paper that argued that the ancient Egyptians were similar to people from the Levant, right? And Soy Kita talks about how the M2 lineage in ancient Egypt was there from the very beginning because of people in the Holocene, people in the Sahara, right? Who went closer to the Nile as that area started to dry out. And so
Okay, hold on. We'll get back to the genetic stuff in just a moment. I want to go back and not let you veer off too far. So you started off with the conversation talking about we can write Igbo words easily with Chinese letters, and it would be just coincidence that you can. That's not historical comparative linguistics, and no one would
no, that's
equate
my
being
point.
able.
It isn't.
No,
It isn't.
but listen, no one would ever consider that a comparison with the language or whatnot. Now, if we agree to a system, like if we translate, that's why the IPA system exists, so that we can take phonemes from Chinese and we can take phonemes from the Igbo language, and then we can use a common script and use that to do the comparisons, not the Chinese script with the Latin script. We transliterate the scripts. And the Igbos don't have an indigenous writing script; they use Latin script. So we would use the Latin script and translate, or transliterate the Chinese script to the Latin and see if there's any correspondences between the languages in terms of form and meaning. This is what we mean by the non-accidental sound meaning correspondences. And it's logic because you're not comparing sounds. That's why I cited in the presentation, and I've done these presentations many times, and I've written this all in books, but people don't like to read books apparently. And so I have to keep reiterating these things on the internet. Science requires an actual existing thing to be compared. And that's why when we, for example, I'm going to go back to the slide. I'm going to share my screen, right? And I go back to the slide of Dr. Chang, right? And when she's talking about mathematics, right? And she says, in the math technique, we use logic. We only want to use sheer logical reasoning, not experiments, not physical evidence, not blind faith or hope or democracy or violence, just logic. So what are the things we study? We study anything that obeys the rules of logic. Mathematics is the study of anything that obeys the rules of logic, using the rules of logic. And to when we are, for example, comparing, let me go to this slide, right? When we're comparing languages, are there any sounds jumping from this screen? Sounds are physical objects. It's the commotion of air. It's a wave in air molecules, and it's going into the ear, and it's being transformed into electrical impulses, which signal to the brain that a sound and emotion is happening once the sound hits your eardrum. These are physical things that we can test in real life and do. Are we doing that right now? On my screen, or do you hear any sound? Of course not.
No.
So when we're doing this, we're only showing the relationships between symbols. We have an agreed upon script that represents certain sound values, and we're comparing the two. It's a logical process. It's a mathematical process. We even have a mathematical formula here. I don't know if you've taken any courses in logic, in mathematics, but this is a mathematical formula. Usually you have A, arrow B, and you would say this: if A, then B. Right? That is a mathematical formula. So what is it? What is it saying? That when we have this on side A, it implies this over here. So when we have Proto-Bantu, Ede, breast, teat, it
Okay, but here's
implies.
the confounding variable. Here's the
Listen,
confounding variable. Okay, go
what
ahead.
is?
Well, I
I'm
mean, well,
sorry.
it's what is the original script of the Yoruba? You're not using the original script of
They're
the Yoruba,
not
are you?
using a script. That again, and if you can't get this basic thing, then there's just not much that we're going to be able to have a discussion on. They don't have original writing scripts. We trans we use a logical process. We represent the sounds and the words in their language using the Latin
And that
script.
is the confounding variable in your argument, is that it is based off of sound, is it not? If it's
No,
so your
but is
argument is in the
listen.
realm of written script, and yet you're dependent upon the translation of sound into script to
Okay,
make this argument.
okay. So when we solve this equation here, right? You're used to numbers. You know what a number is, right? So is this a number? This what I'm circling here, these two watermelons or two watermelon pictures, a number?
They can be if you want them to be, sure.
Exactly. You see, that's the thing in logic. You can do that. Matter of fact, Dr. Chang has a whole chapter on that, on why logic in many cases in mathematics is better than scientific experiments, because you're able to do things in mathematics that you're unable to do in science, in terms of physics, for example. Like we can't rewind the clock and go back to the beginning of the universe. So we have to use logic and mathematics. We have to count backwards. We look at the rate in which the universe is expanding, and assume, of course, that it came from a certain point. And then we calculate its rate of speed and how it's going a year, and we would count backwards and da da da. That's logic. We're substituting. We're substituting the number 8, or the concept of 12 in this instance here, for 2 watermelon slices. And when we add these up, they become 36 in numeric value. And that's the same thing. We're taking the idea and the concept of a Yoruba, or in this instance, a Bantu word from Bantu people, and we're giving it the values. We're representing the values using the Latin script and the IPA script. And the same thing with the ancient Egyptian. And so this is not scientific. This is mathematics. This is logic. And if you don't understand mathematics, you don't understand logic, you're just not going to understand this conversation.
So I have a degree in mathematics, right? So I understand what you're trying to argue. The problem that, in terms of understanding that I might have is, okay, when it comes to a language, right? I haven't studied linguistics, okay, and you clearly have studied linguistics, so I'll give you that, okay. When it comes to ancient Egyptian, your method could be fair in that hieroglyphs are supposed to represent sounds. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Yes. So they represent sounds. So it's fair to use the sounds of ancient Egyptian words and map that to letters in that way. Is the same true, however, for this Yoruba language?
You're asking two different questions.
Right? Because it's fair for ancient Egyptian because you could have just put hieroglyphs in place of that, right?
Yes.
But when it comes to the Yoruba language, is the same would have to be true, which I don't believe that it is. I don't believe that they are using a system that could be easily translated into some forms of hieroglyphs, right?
Yes, you could, but with the exception of that, the hieroglyphs doesn't have vowels. So you couldn't transliterate from Igbo directly into ancient Egyptian because it doesn't have vowels. That's why we use a third party, which is the Latin script or IPA symbols, to represent both. And in that way we can have a conversation. It's no different than if we was to translate, for example, a word problem into a mathematical formula. The mathematical formula itself is a representation of the logic and the innermost basics of the word problem that we're trying to solve. And so it simplifies it and allows us to work it without having to type a whole bunch of different things. And so again, this is why I recommend this book for the layperson to understand mathematics and what it is. And she shows you how many other things are mathematics that you may not think about as mathematics, because mathematics is the study of logic or anything that obeys. Notice why I have this bold. It's the study of anything that obeys the rules of logic, using the rules of logic.
Yeah. So you're. I think that you answered the question in terms of like the Egyptian script, but for the Yoruba, um, they were using, if I'm correct, they called it a Maji or something like that, right? It comes from Arabic script, but they have their own twist on it. Um, which is a Semitic language, which is a Semitic script. So we again are
The
like,
script and the language are two different things. And it seems like you're trying to equate them as if there's some kind of connection between the script.
you're making the connection. You're the one
I'm
who's
not
making
making the connection. They're all symbols. They're arbitrary to the language. They're independent of the language.
Okay, so for example, when it comes to Japanese kanji, the kanji do not tell you, these are Japanese characters, by the way.
Mhm.
They do not tell you how to pronounce things, okay? And so the symbol in one Japanese word may actually mean something completely different and may actually be pronounced completely different, okay? The same is not true for hieroglyphs in ancient Egyptian, okay? When
That's
it
why we
comes,
convert.
no, 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 no.
You're missing the point here. It's a conversion process. The reason why we're able to do the comparisons is because we're able to do is just like a function. And since you're a math person, you know what a function is, right?
Right.
Right. And so it converts whenever you put whatever, like if it's f of x equals da 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 da, you put something in the x in that part which represents the y value on the y side of the equal sign, and then you get a particular value on the other end. It's no different here.
Right.
If I put the vulture glyph, which is the nasalized or velar trill of ancient Egyptian, right? I transliterate it to capital A. That's the manual decodage uh, sign that we use to transliterate the vulture glyph, right? And if I'm comparing that, that's a Latin script symbol, and I use that's supposed to be represent a sound that does not exist in Igbo. So it wouldn't be a problem when trying to articulate Igbo because it doesn't exist in the Igbo language. However, if we find consistently that symbol, when we compare it to Igbo words, and it's in the same, consonant spot as the word in ancient Egyptian, and we can consistently show this like we do um for here, like whatever the B, this is a foot. This in the hieroglyphs, this symbol that we're using here is a foot hieroglyph, but we transliterate it into the Latin script as B because we know it to be the voice bilabial plosive sound. There's other evidence for that. And so we find the same sound that we can represent with the same Latin letter in for Proto-Bantu. And we see that when we have B in the first consonant position, that it corresponds to B in the first consonant position in Proto-Bantu between Ancient Egyptian. And where there's a D in Proto-Bantu, there's an N sound. These don't match. They're not the same sound. It's not about having the same sound. It's about matching them in
You're
the
saying that
corresponding.
there's a function that can take this Proto-Bantu word, and you have an expectation that'll give you the same form for the Egyptian word. That's what you're saying. I understand that. I guess it's just dependent upon the fact that sounds and script map up and line up between ancient in the same way between ancient Egyptian and this Proto-Bantu language you're presenting. Sure, sure, sure. Fair enough, fair enough. So has this method, right? Has this exact same method? If you use this method, to example, to show a connection between languages that are already established to have a connection, would it also
But
work?
how would they have been established? Do you know the process of how they would have been established?
No, no,
What's
no,
the
no.
method? No, I'm
Uh,
asking you a question. When you say already established, because you believe that Niger Congo and Afroasiatic has been established, and so we obviously have an issue here in terms of established. How do you think by way of in the field of historical comparative and linguistics that they actually establish relationships? What is the method that they use?
So you're not gonna answer my question. Like, do you believe it wouldn't work? Is that what you're saying? That
No,
it
I
wouldn't work
don't. I don't.
to
I
use this
didn't.
method?
I didn't answer whether I believe it would work or wouldn't work. If they're using this method, it's going to work if there is a relationship.
Right.
That's why
So,
I'm asking you. Do you even understand how to establish the relationship? That's what I'm asking you.
right. Those are so. I guess that's not so. How can I say this? So, of course, you need to look at the root words, right? And as you were saying earlier, in meaning, but also in sort of the construction, the grammar rules of the language, right? And so once you find those commonalities, you can reconstruct. Okay, um, from all of these languages, this is the commonality. This is like the bare bones from which, let's say, Chadic languages in ancient Egyptian come from. They haven't been able to do that for Afroasiatic languages, but they were able to do that for Niger-Congo B, right? And my question is, if we use your method on, let's say, Niger-Congo B, if you agree it exists, maybe you don't agree it exists, any language family that you agree exists, right? Would it give you the same results that you would expect? Because if you can only use this method to prove that ancient Egyptian is connected to Proto-Bantu, but not to prove that these
No,
other
listen, this is the
languages are connected
standard
themselves.
method. Listen to what I'm saying, and you're not getting it. The comparative method is the method used to establish relationships between any two languages, period. Like your question doesn't even make sense because you're not listening. The comparative method is the method used to establish the relationship between any two languages. And so if the languages are not related, it's going to show up as a result of an analysis using the comparative method. If they are related, it's going to show as a result of doing the comparative method.
Right. So if you took out the scripts, if you took out the so the only way that this is actually true, right, is if you could take the Ajami script specifically for
Oh
Yoruba or something
gosh.
like that, right? And then you can take the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and the correlation still
What
remains,
first of all,
then you do have
what makes you think that in order, like, did the Igbo language exist before that script?
that's true, that's correct, right?
I'm asking the question.
Yeah, these languages did exist before these scripts, right? These
Okay,
scripts were
so
created.
it's so if they didn't have the script, for example, How would you be able to compare the languages?
You would have to. You're saying you would have to transliterate it,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. We're not doing comparisons between, using the Arabic script. That's not the standard script that is used to do comparison. The Latin script is, and the extensions via the IPA. So that's not even a part of the question, which is, again, there's so many basics that you have to understand that you don't, and it's clear by your conversation. And so you're trying to make arguments when you don't understand the field, and that's problematic.
Well, you've been talking about historical and comparative analysis, but your argument, right, hinges on a very sort of fringe, crackpot, kind of essentialist, bare bones view of linguistics that does not involve historical or comparative analysis, right? So, like, again, when it comes to material culture, right, the way that you establish that these people have, sort of common roots is that these words and these concepts are connected to the exposure,
What
right?
what what See, you're one of those people who use words and don't understand what they mean. So when you're talking about material culture, that means actual material things:
Yes.
pots,
Yes.
clothing, um,
For example,
inventions. But hold on,
pottery was
listen. So those are actual physical things. Words are not physical things. There's
they
no
have to
there's
align,
words
they have
words
to
are not
align.
listen, words are not material culture. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And so this is one of those examples. You don't know what you're talking about. You're mixing up stuff and then you're confusing the conversation. You don't understand. Like, I cited 5 or 6 texts in my thing. These are the standard historical comparative linguistic texts that tell you about the methods and everything. You to sit here and say that this is the fringe, when even me citing the gentleman who stated that the when doing the comparison between Semitic and Egyptian, that the standard way is the comparative method. He's letting you know this is standard, and you in your mind equate that to fringe. This lets me know that you're not serious and you don't understand. You don't understand enough to even make an argument or to even ask the right questions, because you don't know the difference between material culture and language.
No, 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 no. I'm saying that when you talk about a like historical comparative linguistics, right? Um, for example, we don't know, like we know from like you know, the material record that ancient Egyptians mostly got their ebony from a place like Punt, which was somewhere near the Horn of Africa, right? And so they didn't have much contact with people from Chad, and yet they have similar words for ebony, right? And so it would be foolish to say that the ancient Egyptians got the word from ebony from people from Chad, and the historical record matches up to the idea that
But
they
who
probably
says that?
no,
Who
no
makes
one
that
is saying that.
argument?
No one is saying that.
Yeah, so it's
I'm
a
saying
mute
that
argument.
wait a second. I'm saying that that argument is ruled out from material sort of culture,
No, it
right?
is not.
But it can't be ruled out simply logically. That is my point. Okay? For
Yeah.
example, pottery introduced from the south of Egypt 2,000 years before pottery existed in Western Asia, okay? Which is why some of the words for pottery are very similar between Nilo-Saharan, right, languages and ancient Egyptian. That is how you use material culture in a comparative historical linguistic analysis to determine like how language flows and how language changes between cultures. You're
I,
saying
I I
that
I
your
want you to
theory
bring. I want
fringes
you to
upon
argue
ignoring
that
material culture.
uh, into some actual academic spaces. I want you to make that argument in an academic space, and if I'm not there personally to witness it, please record it and
I mean,
share it
you
with the
failed to
public.
make your arguments about this whole Bantu
I've
hypothesis
I've
when you
I've
interviewed
made my
Soikita.
arguments in conferences and in on paper and
Okay,
books that you
you
can
had
read.
an interview with Soikita, and
You
you
have
narely
not.
nary mentioned this once, right? Because he's an actual scholar who actually has a degree
I
in this.
talk with
And you never
with
mentioned it.
with
You never mentioned
Kita.
this idea. You could have done a lot for linguistics if you brought up this brilliant idea,
First of all, your
but you
idea
didn't.
is pseudo. It is false. Like it's not even a real thing. It's something you made up in your head because you don't understand the fields, and you want to seem right. But the thing is that you have to, at some point, you're just going to have to humble yourself and get off the internet and go to square one, and with an empty mind and empty vessel, and be in an empty vessel, and study. Take some classes, because you're so far gone. There's no help for you, and so you're in the realm of pseudoscience and religious fanaticism when it comes to this
Religious
information.
fanaticism? This is insane.
Yes.
Simply because I argue that there's been no connection shown between Yoruba and ancient
Hold on,
Egypt.
hold on. I'm gonna show you. For example, like this is not, see, like when it comes to, this is RMW Dixon. He's a linguist out of Australia, and he's examining the Greenberg's methods and categorizations. And he makes this comment here: for many linguists, such views, and I put in parentheses, pertaining to Greenberg's method and the Eurasiatic superphylum, for example, fall more into the category of religious beliefs than scientifically testable hypotheses, about on par with the claims that all languages had the same underlying deep structure. And you would have to study linguistics to know that whole argument. And the position of the stars at the moment of our birth determines our character. Like, how you argue is on par with astrology.
Right.
And it is, you don't know enough and
So
to
in
make
that, but
arguments.
sorry, the issue is that in that same quote that you put up there, right? They talked about scientifically testable hypotheses, and your whole argument for this connection between Yoruba and ancient Egyptian says no, we cannot look into the world of quote unquote scientific hypotheses. We cannot make predictions because we have to do it based off of
No,
pure
I
logic.
didn't say we
Hold
don't
up,
make predictions or anything. Did you
which
pay
tells us
attention to
that
the slide?
you
Hold on,
doubt that
hold
the
on,
material culture
hold on.
and a historical comparative analysis would back you up. And you're right. It wouldn't. It wouldn't back you up at all. And so
Hold on. I didn't say anything. You have a
you have
habit.
to
This is what I
pretend that this
mean.
field of study is purely
Look,
logical
look,
when it is not.
look.
It is not a
It
purely
is
logical
logical.
field of study.
Now, what did I have here? This was a part of a lesson that I did, right? So based upon these three, because we always in linguistics, we have to have a minimum of 3 correspondences. And based on a formula, I asked the question: what do we predict for Proto-Bantu Bod shines? This is not part of the data set here.
I mean, grammatically, you don't even have a set of 3. The BN has a period at the end, right? And ben, right? That is considered to be one word, not separated by the period, right? You would have to
First
have
of
a
all, this
separate
is a
explanation for this
suffix.
in
I
the
have
language.
the dots here to separate the suffixes from the roots. So you would have to
Right.
know the convention. And so these are Proto-Bantu roots. With the exception of this one, they don't include the prefixes or suffixes in
So
the
you have
Reconstruction Proto-Bantu.
you failed to establish a
No,
pattern.
you failed to ask a question. And so you made up something to try to make sense into your head.
No,
And that's why
literally,
you failed at your attempt at trying to falsify what you see on
the
screen,
period
because
is
you
important
clearly
for the
don't want to
grammar.
deal with the fact here that we deal with predictions. We create models and things, and we set up sound meaning correspondences so that we can make predictions when we come across words that are not in our original data set. And we confirm our predictions by doing more comparisons. And so this idea, you don't know what you're talking about, and it's clear.
Right. So your argument's based around sort of attacking like what I know and what
I
I'm talking about,
I'm not attacking, well, you
rather
don't
than
know much of
debunking the.
anything when it comes to this.
I
So
mean,
I'm not
sure, you could
attacking
say
what you
that,
don't know.
and
I'm
I could spend
attacking
my
the
time
audacity.
calling you pseudo and
I'm
hotep and all
attacking
of
the
this.
audacity of you to try to make arguments based upon what you don't know. And not once did you say in this whole conversation, I don't know. That's
I said
that's
I
not
was
your
less
thing.
familiar with linguistics. I have a degree in
No,
mathematics
you know
and
nothing
linguistics.
about linguistics. That's the point. And I'm trying to teach you. I've given you source material for you to study. Not once did you say, you know what, I'm going to go back and I'm going to, for example, I'm going to go and purchase um, historical linguistics 2, theory and description in phonology, or I'm going to go purchase Dr. Lyle Campbell's historical linguistics and introduction, or I'm going to purchase the Continuum Companion to Historical Linguistics, or I'm going to get Dr. Juana Pasalo's System Proto-Indo-European Phoneme Inventory, Sound Law System, or I'm going to get Comparative Semitic Linguistics, a manual by Dr. Patrick R. Bennett. I'm going to pick up these texts and I'm going to learn how historical linguistics is done. Instead of saying that, you in turn want to argue and just make up stuff as you go. And I don't know, what school you went to or where they do that at. But where I'm from, we don't do that. If we just say, you know what, I don't know. And this is
Do
very
you though?
interesting.
Do
And
you
I
though?
want to learn more about this. I'm going to go study, but not you. You say, you know what, forget studying, forget purchasing the books, forget taking classes. I'm just going to make up stuff as I go and I'm going to make all
Well,
kinds of arguments
what is
and
your
the like.
pathetic attempt at mathematical linguistics, which is actually a field of study, right? Which you failed to incorporate in this presentation, even though your whole crackpot theory fringes upon it, right? You failed
I
to
have a
cite
whole
any
series of
scholar of
presentations on
mathematical. No, no,
mathematical
no. You failed to
linguistics.
cite any scholar in mathematical linguistics, even though it's a valid field of study, right? And you could see if what you're arguing maps up with methods available to mathematical linguistics when it comes to establishing lingua
Oh
phyla, right?
boy.
And you failed. You
It's
failed to do
it's
that,
it's
even though you're the one
it's clear.
presenting an
It's
argument
it's
which hinges
clear.
upon mathematical
It's
linguistics.
clear. I'm just going to ask you a question. Are you going to purchase any books on historical comparative linguistics? And are you going to read the text? And are you going to do the exercises? And are you going to consult with linguistic professors to see if you're doing it correct? That's all I want to know at this point.
You know what? I will take your books, right? Whatever book you have, I'll take your book. I'll read.
Don't. You
I'll
you
try to
already have to
find
know some things about my books to purchase the books. I asked you specifically. I haven't written
uh-huh,
any introduction to historical comparative linguistics. I'm
right.
asking you, are you going to purchase some introduction to historical comparative linguistics works
Uh-huh.
and some basic, actually that's kind of a subfield, so you really need to get the linguistics books first
Uh-huh.
and then go to historical comparative linguistics. Are you going to do that so that you can better understand the field, so that you can ask more intelligent questions and that you can make more academically sound arguments for the future? That's my question. That's all. You don't have to purchase
Right.
my book.
I'll do you one better. I'll see if I can find those books on JSTOR at my library, and then I'm gonna take your attempt to do some mathematical linguistics to maybe my school's logician, maybe someone who teaches in the linguistics department at my college, and then I'm going to do a nice write up for you into like why it is pseudobabble. I mean, maybe I have to use academic jargon, but it's clear
You
to
would
see
you
that
would have to read and
you're
understand
looking for
first before
patterns,
you can
Asar.
argue. You can't say it's
Asar,
pseudo
you're
babble if
looking for
you.
patterns and you're inventing like
I
fields of
haven't
study that don't
invented and
exist to
invented in fields
justify
of study of
your
nothing.
religious
This
ideology that
shows.
somehow Bantus had
Listen,
something to
listen,
do with
listen,
ancient Egypt.
listen. Black Bodie, purchase the books first, do the work, and then come back. I will open my show for you after you have done the work.
Okay, so you
It's an
what you're
open
saying to
invitation.
me
I
is
don't hate on this program. I let you speak your piece, and is brilliant and or ignorant as it may be, you have a platform here. So when you do that, come back so we can have a conversation.
All right, and then
Is that
please do
is
some
that a
research
bet?
into yeah, please do some research into actual like mathematical linguistics. I'm sure we'll have a great Royal Rumble. You've been kind enough to give me a platform on your platform. I appreciate it, and best of luck to you.
You too, man. You have a good week.
Bodie, man, that damn Bodie, man. He's a crazy guy, man. He hates the Bantu theory, man. I mean, it teases him off, man. Like he's strictly by the Western books and all that, man. I mean, we go back and forth on Twitter Space at least since January, man. I mean, we have a space every week going back and forth. Now, I'm gonna tell you something about Bodie. Now, he runs from the cultural evidence. That's the funny part. There's a guy named Mr. Imhotep. He kind of specializes in kind of collecting these cultural comparisons and just posting them and just posting different stuff about Kemet that connects it to Africa. He hates those. I mean, and all of them, like they absolutely hate those comparisons because, like Dr. Sheikh Anajob said, the strongest evidence is not the genetic evidence, it's not the biological evidence, it's not even the linguistic evidence. It's the damn culture. It's the culture.
Yeah,
The
but
culture
you can't have the culture without
the
linguistic
language.
evidence.
Yeah,
Because they have to articulate and
True
express the
that.
culture
True that.
using the language.
I mean, he did demonstrate though. The wall of language is related though. His 100. So, like, let me ask a question because I see damn near every Niger Congo group, has 100-word list, especially in Nigeria and in Ghana and whatnot.
Uh-huh.
What is the difference between what has been done in those comparisons versus what you do? Because I see some people.
I would have to see the specific comparisons.
Okay.
So like let me see if I can pull something up. For example, and I'm gonna show you the difference.
Okay.
Using Afro-Asiatic. I don't know about. I have some work that deals with Niger Congo, but this will kind of sum up pretty much what they do. So I'm going to pull up Christopher Ayers. I have the PDF of this of his book. I actually have the physical representation of this book as well. But this is his 1995. Oh no, this is a different book. It's by the same author, Christopher Ayers, and this is the archaeological and linguistic reconstruction of African history. So this came out in 70 or 90 something. It was like 90. Hold on. This came out in 1982. But this is not the text I'm looking for. Let me see. Here we go. This is the text. And it's Reconstructing Proto-Afro-Asiatic vowels, tones, consonants, and vocabulary. Right. So this is the famous text, which a lot of them try to go to and don't understand historical comparative linguistics. Right. So darn it, because it's not gonna translate well, because his main comparisons, well, on a PDF, of course, is going to be vertical, but it's meant to be read horizontally, like you see, like right here.
Yeah.
But I guess there's a way. I think there's a way to rotate the page, at least rotate clockwise. Right. Okay. So this should help. So let me see if I can increase. It's supposed to be a way that you can view it like full screen. There we go. So I hope you can see, right?
Yes, sir.
So, his evidence. This is just a random page. I don't. Uh, but this is representative to what he has done in all the other pages, right?
Okay.
So, so what he does, so he already assumes that Afro-Asiatic is a language phylum, right? And so a phylum is not the same as a family. A phylum is supposed to be a super grouping of language families, right? So we have Semitic as a family, Egyptian is its own family, you have Cushitic as a family, Chadic as a family, and Omatic as a family. So what he's doing is taking the reconstructions of all of the so-called Afro-Asiatic families and comparing them together. And not even comparing Berber, because Afro-Asiatic is supposed to also be Berber languages, but there's no Berber language comparison in this text, right?
Right.
So this violates a scientific law here, because allegedly to them the reconstructions are hypothetical and don't exist. And so you always, at least to start with, you compare actual languages. So the only language with any actual words is Egyptian, because Egyptian is its own language family, quote unquote, right? So
Right.
Semitic is not a language, Cushitic is not a language, Chadic is not a language, Omatic is not a language. These are language families. And so what a lot of people will do is do exactly what Christopher Arid here is doing. You won't see, for example, like what I did here with going back to my Yoruba example. Like you would never see them. Let me go back. Um, where's Okay, here we go. I'm sorry. So let me make that full screen. So you see how I'm comparing two languages, actual languages,
Yeah.
and you see that for each correspondence, there's a or for each compared term, lexeme, there's a correspondence in the Yoruba language, for example, with Chikam or Egyptian. Like he doesn't do this at all in the text. So we don't even know if his reconstructions are sound, because he doesn't even compare the individual Semitic languages, or any individual Semitic language, for example, with an Omatic language or with a Chadic language. And so they get upset, like when I present information like this to any linguist who tries to argue that quote unquote Niger Congo and ancient Egyptian can't be compared. I say, well, can you show ancient Egyptian comparisons, in the same way that we can do with Yoruba, like this, with any let's say Hausa um, or some Hebrew or Arabic or any of them, and do this? They can't do it, because this is the comparative method. What Green, excuse me, what Christopher Arid here is doing is the mass comparison method. And
Gotcha.
it may look the same, but it's not, right? Because you're supposed to establish these relationships first. And there has never been a systematic Semitic Egyptian, or you could just take two Semitic languages, take ancient Egyptian, take two Cushitic languages, take two Chadic languages, take two Omatic languages, right? From different branches of these language phylum, and just compare those languages. And when you're able to establish regular sound meaning correspondences like you can do between Egyptian and Yoruba, between those individual languages, then you have an Afro-Asiatic. But they never do this. And you just ask any linguist that argues for the existence of Niger Congo or Afro-Asiatic for comparisons like this between those languages. It doesn't exist. And that's when they start getting into some pseudo arguments that don't make any kind of sense because they don't have the information to back up what they're talking about. You know,
True
you
that.
see here, I'm always ready to demonstrate. I'll pull it up, show you on the spot. I ain't got no
Yeah.
problem.
Right. Yeah, that was a great lecture you gave to Bodie, though, man. Very great lecture. I know, I'm sure he's on Twitter right now, dutying on himself. He don't know how to handle defeat. So,
I'm hoping he went straight to Amazon. That's what I'm hoping.
nah, man. I mean, I don't know, man.
I
That
don't.
dude,
I do not get paid by any of those publishers for promoting those books. I don't know the authors personally, so you know it's not a. I benefit none at all by having those promoting those books. But it's interesting that people who don't read, who don't study the field, want to make arguments all the time, and you just got to cut that off at the beginning. Like, no, I need you to read first. Come back when you done, because you'll
yeah,
just be arguing. He'll just be making up stuff as he goes all day, and we'll be here all night.
yeah,
And
he was
I don't
really,
have time.
yeah, he was trying to really get into Proto Bantu B, and he was trying to go on the assumption that you assumed that was reconstructed, and from there he was gonna try to attack from there. I mean, I knew you were gonna eat him up. I mean, it was just like but for months he's been
That's why.
ducking it.
That's why I was saying that even the Remetch conversation, we can't have the Remetch conversation if he don't understand how historical comparative linguistics work.
Right,
Or
right.
like what if he don't get that basic, he's not going to get the Remetch conversation at all.
And I think he has a confirmation bias with regards to the whole Afro-Asiatic thing. Try to use genetics and that the fucked up interpretation of bad information to try to patch it all together and stuff. I mean, it's so though, man. I mean, but that's what they thrive on, dog. They thrive on that on Twitter, man. Twitter space and some of these forums.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting nonetheless. But that's why we had these conversations. I'm not here to be mean to the brother or shit on him. That's not my spirit. I'm here for education, and but you have to do the work. There's just no way around it. If you're not willing to do the work and do the basics, then we can't have a conversation. It's just as simple as that. Because I'm not going to argue with people who don't want to invest in themselves. Like and by way of his conversation, he's someone who can't be taught, which I doubt. He really has a degree in mathematics, um, because it requires a certain level of rationale to do mathematics, and that's just what it is. And he hasn't displayed that, but I wish him well, and I hope he reads the text and does all of that. And if he comes back in 2 weeks, I know he's not serious. Uh, but
Yeah,
anyway,
man. I think you schooled him, man. I appreciate you taking the time to do that, man. That was me asking in the chat, man. If you can school him on some things. At least give him the basics, man. As much as he could stomach, man. That
yeah,
truth is just eating him, man. That's truth is his kryptonite. Black. God bless Black Bodie, man. I see you on Twitter, man.
yeah. Well, that's my introduction to him. So
Well,
he's an interesting character. But
yeah,
I'm finna end this because I got some things to do.
right. I'm
And
about to hit the gym, man. I appreciate it, dog.
no
Appreciate
doubt.
it.
All right,
All
man.
right. One.
But I'll see you later. I appreciate every one of y'all for coming to the after party, quote unquote. But I'm about to bounce because I got some other work I need to do. and I can't be arguing with all y'all in these internet streets. So with that said, y'all be easy. See you later. Peace.